जैसे कि आप जानते हैं ये कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग प्रोग्राम है which is conducted through NIUA partnered with BBLF and CRDF is supporting the capacity building of the government actors through the agencies that members of which all of you are here today. So this we have discussed today. What we can do is अगर ये जो symbols हमने कल सारे slide show में discuss किए थे, I did point out which symbols were used when. So if there is any confusion about these symbols or any other matter of delivering the slides, please let us know. So I'll be happy to take up those questions later on. How do you localize? So these are all the symbols that we discussed. Today's structure of the presentation is also similar. So before I start and I go on to the introduction part, I would request everybody to please take up, there is one Google form that has been shared with the participants. अगर आप वो form भर सकते हैं अभी, it will just take you 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, not more. It will help us understand how much understanding is there currently on the topic, and later after the training हम फिर से उसको देख सकते हैं कि has that improved or not. So request everybody to do this. So today's module also one can basically structure it into parts where first we have a discussion. This is to say that how will this be delivered to your trainees. आप जब ट्रेनिंग दे रहे हैं गवर्नमेंट ऑफिशियल्स को तो ऐसे स्ट्रक्चर किया जा सकता है. Your 2 hours can be split into parts where you have first ice breaking round or introduction round. Secondly, you have components discussed और आज आप जो हम बात कर रहे हैं वो है ITC services, infant toddler caregiver services. So इसके बारे में there is a possibility that you can discuss. Third part would be discussing the challenges of implementing some of the guidelines. So we will look at some guidelines of implementing the infant toddler caregiver neighborhood. So this is how this 90 minutes, 2 hours can be structured. So I'll start with a quick recap of what we looked at yesterday. Yesterday we touched upon the concepts of early childhood development. क्यों important है बहुत ही छोटा जो बच्चा है 0 to 6 years उसका phase, why is it important? उसके लिए डिजाइन अप्रोचेस क्या हो सकते हैं और कहाँ पे हम इम्पैक्ट इसके लिए कर सकते हैं. सो दिस इज व्हाट वाज डिस्कस्ड. वी आल्सो डिस्कस्ड इन्फेंट टॉडलर केयर गिवर नेबरहुड जो हम बोल रहे हैं ITCN. उसके मायने क्या है, उसका डेफिनेशन क्या है, किसको हम बोलेंगे इन्फेंट टॉडलर एंड केयर गिवर. Third thing that we discuss is social and behavior change communication. So specific methods that how these policies and programs can be communicated so that they are beneficial for the users. And then in the last we discussed ITCN framework. So infant toddler caregiver friendly neighborhood का net framework क्या है, मतलब कैसे उसको बनाना चाहिए और क्या चीजें उसमें कवर हो सकती. As an extension of that, today what we are discussing is we are going to, it appears a longer sort of delivery, but there are lots of visuals which we will cover fast, so it will be done in the time that we have hopefully. आज हम बात कर रहे हैं play और play spaces. खेलना कूदना उसको किसे कहते हैं, क्यों जरूरी है और उसका अपने इन्फेंट टॉडलर केयरगिवर के साथ क्या कनेक्शन है. Then we are going to see what is guidelines. When we say there are some guidelines for such neighborhood, fourth part we are going to look at fourth and fifth part guidelines for streets and guidelines for open spaces. And end में हम बात करेंगे कि ये guidelines हमें समझ में आया. This is only an overview of the guidelines. We are not going into the technical details of each and every type of guideline. Maybe in the next course we can go into more depth of this टेक्निकल अंडरस्टैंडिंग, बट एंड में हम बात करेंगे कि ये गाइडलाइंस को डिलीवर कैसे किया जा सकता है. So let's quickly start with understanding play and play spaces. Yesterday we started with understanding early childhood development. Today we want to understand what is actually play, why is it important, so on and so forth. So for young children, the whole world is a playground, we can say. You know, they don't differentiate between play, leisure, and learning. While they are learning, they are playing. They are playing while they learn. I mean, they learn while they play, and vice versa. So pura jahan inke liye, it is a big playground, and every encounter that they do, especially young children, is a part of the learning that is happening. So this is how the activities we've seen yesterday, that how the young children do learn with a whole lot of social and cognitive skills while interacting with their caregiver and the environment. But it becomes important that the city planners also uh, for the city planners, there is also a consideration of provision of ample space for playing, but also ensure that the experience of the city, because everything that is around the children is a experience and learning, it should be enriching for the children. So it can, because it can impact the children's health, the development of their faculties, and it can also sort of foster a love for their community life. बहुत सारे बच्चे, हमने कल थोड़े फिगर्स देखे कि इंडिया इज अ यंग कंट्री एंड 10% पॉपुलेशन, more than 10% population is children, and most of these population actually lives in the cities. अब cities में जब बच्चे रहते हैं तो उन्हें बहुत सारे advantages है, जैसे they have access to better schools or health cares, but उसके साथ बहुत सारे disadvantages भी आते हैं. It's a same package that they also get a lot of problems like pollution, lack of independent mobility, खुद घूम फिर नहीं सकते हैं because there is a lot of risk of getting hurt through traffic, etc. And there is also most of the time inadequate play spaces for them, which is a deterrent for their growth also. Over and above this, there is also a problem with active play. Active play is when you are physically playing, especially in the outdoor areas. This is an integral part of the development of the child's motor skills. But also it's an important tool for a lot of other development like cognitive development and emotional development also. So it is essential communicative and engaging methods for the children in the early years. So, बहुत छोटे बच्चों के लिए ये काफी उनका environment का understanding काफी important है, because while playing, children actually experience real emotions, and that is how they learn to adapt to the situation. Other important aspects of the environment is that display environment in these spaces has also a direct relationship between how the children feel or they act and they behave. So अभी थोड़े समय से हम कोविड में हैं, इंडोर्स है, तो ऐसे आपने बहुत सारे वीडियोस देखे होंगे वायरल, जो बहुत छोटे बच्चे जो जस्ट चलना सीखे हैं, इफ दे गो आउट एंड दे लुक एट अ नॉब और समथिंग, they start pressing it and think that, you know, इसमें से sanitizer बाहर आएगा. So everything that they look at, they observe, and they are, you know, like a sponge, they are absorbing it. और फिर उसके साथ उसका relationship, meaning, association, ये सब होता है. So जो देखते हैं उसका direct impact है, and they are also very curious. But हम हमारे cities में ज्यादातर देखा जाता है कि ये height पे जहाँ पे ये बच्चे इंटरेक्ट करते हैं, there is only pollution or even garbage, so it's not a really a very enriching experience. So we majorly think that बच्चे कहाँ होते हैं, so सब जगह बच्चे होते हैं, सब जगह वो खेलते हैं. The place where they live, you know, around their houses and their neighborhoods, where they play, so parks and grounds, where they learn. So they learn to sort of learn in the schools, formally learn in the schools. We are saying that they learn everywhere, but also they navigate their environment on foot. So this is when they are moving around all these places. So streets, they are very important aspects of the part of the design. So these are important places in the environment where we are saying that we should give services for this, for the children. So the way the children play, they live, they learn and move between all these spaces. Especially the children we are focused on in this training is 0 to 6 years. Interventions in that at that this further highlights that it's very important that how this perspective is developed, right? So especially children of 0 to 5 years and their caregivers, which we are calling yesterday ITC unit. This needs to be easily accessible for the ITC unit, and they are more dependent on the parents, especially in this age. So also comfort for the caregivers is important. Now let us look at a typical circuit that a child would go through. So you see that there is a circuit where बच्चा और उनका जो केयर गिवर है वो कहाँ कहाँ जाते हैं. तो हम देख सकते हैं कि जहाँ रहते हैं वहां से शायद बच्चे को लेके वो वर्क प्लेस में जाते हैं. इफ देयर इज अ क्रैश दे वुड टेक द चिल्ड्रन देयर, एंड व्हाइल कमिंग बैक यू वुड डू सम काइंड ऑफ अ शॉपिंग. बट दिस वुड बी अ वेरी शॉर्ट मोबिलिटी चेन, बट बहुत और इवॉल्व मोबिलिटी चेन्स भी हो सकते हैं. जैसे दो बच्चे हैं केयर गिवर के साथ में, so they would go and drop the first child to the nursery school, then the bigger elder child to the normal school, then the person would go to a workplace. On the way back again collect these children, come back home, from the home drop some of the bags, again they might go to visit somebody or again go to shopping. So ye or फिर leisure trips that they do. So sometimes you go to a family home, जो दादा दादी है उनके यहाँ पे उनको ड्रॉप किया जाता है. So this is all the circuit that they sort of mobility chain, like we have defined it here, that the child is experiencing every day. So they spend a lot of time outdoors, either in the company of their daily caregiver or as a participant of the recreation. So playground में है तो वो खुद participate कर रहे हैं वहाँ पे in playing, and the infinite arrangements, like you can see in the third sort of diagram. यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हैं कि कितने सारे अलग अलग जगह पे विजिट्स करते हैं बच्चे. So this is for the babies and toddlers, the public realm, the public space outside is invariably they are with the caregiver. This is important to remember. That is why we are always not separating the caregiver as an adult from the children's experience. And to design this well, you need to have some kind of requirements that are specifically addressed. नाउ ये तो हमने समझा कि बहुत जरूरत है बाहर की जगह जो हम पब्लिक स्पेसेस है उनको ठीक से देखने की थ्रू द लेंस ऑफ अ यंग चाइल्ड. बट अभी क्या हो रहा है? सो इफ वी ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड द करंट प्लानिंग फ्रेमवर्क, planning framework through which the cities are planned or even developed, or like we would like to call it design, but well, we cannot really say that. How does that happen? प्लानिंग होता है पार्सल्स का डिवीजन. सो वी क्रिएट द पार्सल्स और प्लॉट्स फॉर प्राइवेट डेवलपमेंट. देन रोड रास्ते बनाते हैं, उसके अंदर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ले किया जाता है. सो वी बिल्ड दिस काइंड ऑफ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर विच इज रोड्स, एंड इन सम सिटीज there is also a provision of some kind of open spaces and parks, right? So this is how currently the Indian cities are operating. However, if you are saying that you want to create an ITCN, infant toddler caregiver neighborhood, that is safe for young children, we need to look into designing some of the streets that are people friendly and they are not vehicle friendly, right? And designing the play spaces which are for very young people, very young children. And like yesterday we said, they should be inclusive, exploratory, imaginative, but most importantly, it meets the aspirations of the child. बच्चे को क्या चाहिए वो समझ में आए और उसका प्रोविजन अगर हो, that is the most important, which is the gap between the current state of affairs, and this needs to be addressed urgently if we want to create this environment for the young children. And hence we are doing this training. So around the world, the perception of urban development, urban planning in the different countries is undergoing a big shift, a paradigm shift, and that is also happening. We are witnessing very fast in our country as well. So the center of focus is basically shifting from infrastructure driven approach to a human centric approach, right? And this realization of changing the way we plan our cities or we even manage our future developments of the existing cities is crucial in the immediate times. So what is being highlighted here is that urban design and the concepts of emerging paradigms that are there. तो आपने urban 95 के बारे में हमने कल बात किया. So that is one of the initiatives that is being done in this direction. But there are also many such things as measurement of happiness index in the cities, most livable cities, sociable cities, 15-minute cities. तो ये आपने शायद सुना होगा. ये पूरा शिफ्ट जो हो रहा है प्लानिंग पैराडाइम में, दैट इज आल्सो वेरी ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक एंड चाइल्ड इज ऑफ कोर्स द सेंटर ऑफ ऑल ऑफ दैट. नाउ लेट अस ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड गाइडलाइन. ठीक है, तो आपके साथ में दो विजुअल्स शेयर करूंगी. देयर आर टू विजुअल्स दैट यू विल सी एंड आई वुड लाइक यू टू टेल मी, प्लीज अनम्यूट योरसेल्फ एंड टेल मी व्हाट इज इट दैट यू सी. यू नो, आपको क्या दिख रहा है और ये क्यों एनवायरमेंट है जो चिल्ड्रन के लिए, यंग चिल्ड्रन के लिए अच्छा होगा. So this is a first picture. Please unmute and tell me. I will make a quick note of whatever is being said. Capture some keywords here. Anybody is welcome to contribute. Epsiba, they can everybody can unmute, right? Themselves. So what is it that you see?
Rekha ma'am is
Yes,
unmuted. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what you can see is really you have the street on one side, and on the other side you have this park area, which is made where you have a play area where the teenagers are playing. Then you have a lawn and seating area where the caregivers and the younger ones can sit and play. And this is being divided so that there are safe areas and there is the area which is of course for transport. That is the road. And there is a path to walk between the play area and the road.
Right.
Pedestrianized setup. So there's no scope of danger for the children who are playing, so they can play freely. You can see a small child almost close to the road who's playing near the sitting area. So yeah, it seems like a safe space.
Yes. Let me quickly go to the next picture as well. Unfortunately, we would have loved that we can share some Indian examples. Maybe if we were to do this next year in some time, we will also have a lot of examples in the Indian cities. नहीं है, ऐसा नहीं है. इसके बाद में Indian examples से explain करूँगी आपको कि ये क्या guidelines है also. Anyone would like to contribute to this picture? Anything that anyone would like to share? जो आप देख रहे हैं उसमें what is a positive aspect here in the street?
Pedestrianized.
Pedestrianized.
Who feels safe at a scale of, I think it's a very human scaled walkway. Yeah.
Great. So these both the pictures actually capture all the aspects of the ITCN objective that we discussed yesterday, right? And lot of you also pointed this out. The aspects were safe. So all of you are saying that this seems very safe, both the pictures. We said it should be green, right? So you see a lot of green here. It is trees. In the previous picture, it is also some kind of a lawn that is there, inclusive and playful. So there is a lot of opportunity to play. There is safety. ये सारी चीजें हैं जो इसको ह्यूमन स्केल पे किसी ने बताया कि ह्यूमन स्केल पे है, बच्चे सेफ फील करते हैं. So these are all conducive environments where children would love to play. Unfortunately, this is even more should be even more detailed for the younger child because they experience the city at that particular level, and that is where they are also growing. Their brains are growing very, very fast. So this is what we call as experiential urban design. हमने जो पहले देखा कि प्लानिंग होता है उसमें रास्ते बनाते हैं हम पार्सल्स बनाते हैं या डेवलपमेंट हो सकता है वहां पे एक्सपीरियंस जो है उसकी बहुत बात नहीं हो सकती है बिकॉज वी आर नॉट रियली हैविंग दैट काइंड ऑफ अ बैलेंस so what does urban design do and why are we talking about experiential urban design because we want to understand the importance of guidelines. What urban design does is that it crafts an experience in the city's public space. We normally see the scenario which is on our left, where a walkway is absent or it is broken, or people are forced to actually walk on the street. The walkway is really so badly maintained or almost absent. So the same kind of issues you would also see at the parks and gardens and other services also. Now, what you see on the right, however, is it's an example in Pune. It is an Indian example. This is where, with the help of guidelines, one can enhance this kind of an experience in a particular space. Especially, this is very, very relevant for ITC related services. So, what are we able to see in this picture? We are able to see that there is a edge definition. So ये क्या जरूरी चीज है? Edge है एक जो बंधा हुआ है, लेकिन हम उसके आर पार देख सकते हैं पीछे क्या है. It is transparent, it is connecting. So it's not a blank wall. क्योंकि हम जहाँ पे भी blank wall देखते हैं, we will see that it is abused. There are, it is made dirty. There are posters which are stuck there. So there are a lot of issues. So there is an edge definition. There is a possibility of having some activity. Like the edge in this case is made in such a way that यहाँ लोग बैठ सकते हैं क्योंकि पीछे maybe there is a public space, so this is possible. So activity generate ho sakti hai on the ground level, on the eye level, which makes the place in front of it very active and also very safe because there are always people here. Plantation hai. Plantation, of course, green infrastructure, green hone chahiye. Cities kal humne baat ki. So green is very important. Children can look at some green spaces and they would really love to engage. It is at the height of the child, so it's very, very important. But it also allows other aspects that पानी जो बारिश का गिरता है वो भी absorb हो जाता है. So there are other, of course, sustainable practices related aspects that also green would add. It is always shaded, the temperature would be cooler, and there is space to walk, and there is space for ITC unit to walk safely, maybe with a pram or with some bags. That is possible to be done. Now, what happens so what are the guidelines? What happens through the guidelines is that these are some kind of guiding principles after the planning is done. So ये एक diagram में आप देख सकते हैं कि buildings बने हुए हैं, parcels, plots है वहाँ पे buildings बने हुए हैं और road हो गया है. उसके बाद through these indicative principles, one can say ground पे अगर आप कोई active use रखो तो it will be beneficial. How wide the sidewalk should be for ITC to walk safely. So these are the set of principles which we are calling as design guidelines for ITC that can help define the design goals. क्या चाहिए हमें? Safety चाहिए ITC unit के लिए और green चाहिए, all the objectives that we have discussed yesterday, and they also illustrate how these principles can be applied. So आज हम थोड़ा उसके अंदर भी देखेंगे कि कैसे ये प्रिंसिपल्स अप्लाई हो सकते हैं. And the guidelines are also helpful in defining the quality of environment. जो हमने बात किया experience के बारे में, that can only be done through the quality of the experience. Now, what is important to understand is that guidelines are not mandates. Just like many of our cities have general development control regulations, they are not, and these can be mandated, they can be enforced by law. Guidelines are not may not be mandatory immediately when you are right now going to start working with the cities. But so they cannot be enforced by law, but they can be recommendations that if they are followed, they can create the quality of experience that we discussed in these above slides. Now, here the guidelines, we have a guideline document, you are all aware of that. that will work closely with the ENM matrix, which will you can measure the quality through the matrix, come back, use the guidelines, and I will also keep explaining how this is done. But for our understanding, these two documents are tied with each other. They support each other, and they'll constantly you will see referencing, cross referencing on these pages. So these are the two documents currently from which all the presentation contents have been also prepared, most of it, and they work closely with each other because guidelines principles बनाएंगे लेकिन वो implement हो रहे कि नहीं उसको भी measure करना जरूरी है, right? Okay. Now, how do we use these guidelines? So they are organized. All these sets of information is organized to inform the environment. And what are these components of the environments? There is a neighborhood, streets, parks and open spaces, social infrastructure, and urban services. Now, in the orientation course, we are only going to have a brief introduction about guidelines for neighborhood, streets, and parks. And we will take deeper understanding of the social infrastructure and urban services and also more on these first three components in the next courses. So neighborhood would cover a large scale organizational factors such as overall character, density, distance, and mix of activities. Streets would look at mainly mobility related spaces concerning to particularities between how the ITC unit can move comfortably. Parks and open spaces would cover some common destination that an ITC would visit. And then social infrastructure would cover all the community services, and your urban services would cover water, electricity, drainage, and other environmental factors, right? So these are the components of the guidelines. Now let's quickly understand what is this guidelines. We understood what the guideline can do, but how they can be applied. So the first step, if you want to apply any guideline, would be to determine the scale of intervention. So guidelines can be at the very large level of a city level. For example, there are you need to sort of some policy level interventions are required at the city level. Next, you can have more elaborate and more permanent interventions that can be done at the neighborhood. So in the neighborhood of the city, it can be done. And the last part is actually at the scale of a street or a park, where particularly the redevelopment is also possible if the park and the street is already existing to make it ITC friendly, right? So first thing to do is to determine the scale at which you would like to intervene. The second step would be to determine the objective. What is the objective of designing that component, part of the environment? So agar aap street redesign karna chahte hain, so you need to first determine whether you want to make it into a safe street. There could be other objectives also, like making it a playful street or making it a social street or a green street. So let's take an example of a safe street. The objectives to redesign is now set that you want to make it a safe street. So what would you do? You need a safe street for children to cross, right, safely. So you would have crossing. You can have alternative paving materials in these places, which alerts the driver and forces them to stop. We can have speed limits also guided. So safe street is the second step where we have determined the objective. The next step would be to select correct components for that particular objective. So when we are saying that it is safe street, how do you select the component which is appropriate for making the street safe? So you need to maybe one can create playful patterns or some kind of a tiling of the sidewalk, which will create some multiple areas. Paint and chalk could be used for marking out places, and then mundane street crossings could actually become more inviting through some kind of storytelling like you see in the picture. And these are again all pictures in the Indian cities, and this can not only increase the aesthetic appeal, but it is also beneficial for the pedestrian or the ITC unit who is using these streets, right? So this is like a 3-step method to which we can make the guidelines, apply the guidelines to a particular component. So some of the sample processes also which are picked up from the matrix are that if you want to carry out any new project, the first thing that is required to be done is to collect the data. Once you have a baseline survey, it might offer you, like you can see here, that there is a major lack of natural green environment in these neighborhood parks. So again, there is a consultation process which is required for understanding the ITCN objective. So connect to the nature is an ITCN objective that can benefit from having more natural spaces. So this can have a bigger guideline, like that you need a big park or a green forest around this space. Or it can also be translated, like you can see in this little picture, कि जहाँ पे बच्चे चलते हैं पार्क्स के आसपास, जहाँ पे भी अपॉर्चुनिटी है वहाँ पे you can increase the green. So this is one sample process in which you can use this. I will keep coming back to the process so that it is very clear how these guidelines can be approached. So this is another process through which, if your baseline survey that the data is collected, the next module we have is on using of the data, and that is also the fourth module that we have. And here we will again take a deeper understanding of data and how it is important and what kind of data is required. So in the survey, if we come to know that there is a single block, but there are a lot of streets, then how do you go about it? So here you will again understand that this space needs safe and healthy interconnected streets. So the wider goal could be to have a pedestrian route, entire route. So there is at a neighborhood scale. And to reach the park, you need a safe route for the ITC unit. But at the immediate scale, what can, although there is a lot of traffic, whatever space is available, one can have safety measures taken. So this is a sample process of how these 3 steps are taken. So there is a scale determination, there is an objective that a safety is required or green infrastructure is required. Next, the component is selected, and then it can be quickly applied. So if I can just give an example here to understand this better, suppose you come up with the objective that there is a space required for seating in a park, right? तो bench लगाना है या seating का कुछ provision करना है. अब आप देख सकते हैं कि ये जो bench है, that is wider than a normal bench that you would see. Now this is where the ITCN related service infrastructure provision comes in, because this needs to be, anybody would agree that providing a bench is a positive expenditure. So it is most welcome. But if this provision of the bench is carefully coupled with the quality of the shading, कहाँ लगाना चाहिए bench? तो यहाँ पे पेड़ है, यहाँ shade already है. It is designed extra wide so that a baby can crawl on it. If the caregiver has just placed a very young baby on it, the caregiver can also put a sleeping baby on it while the caregiver can rest, or the bags can be put. So this is a critical information that guidelines can help understanding how that whatever you need, the components, how they can design with the help of keeping ITC lens in the forefront. So guidelines, now let us understand guidelines for neighborhoods. So ITC neighborhood kya hai, kaise hai, that we have already covered yesterday. I'm going to stop sharing and we are going to go on to a very quick poll on Mentimeter. Mentimeter हम directly use कर सकते हैं on our phones or devices by either just scanning this QR code or entering the code that is mentioned here on even your laptop or your PC. menti.com पे जाके इसको access किया जा सकता है. Shashank, we can go to the poll now.
Some participants, I can see only one person.
I can see only one. Yeah.
Requesting everyone, again, just giving instructions about how to access the Mentimeter. Quickly, if you can scan the QR code, आप अपने फोन को खोल के गूगल लेंस से इस QR कोड को स्कैन कर सकते हैं और ये डायरेक्टली आपको Mentimeter पे लेके जाएगा, या फिर alternatively you can go to www.menti.com and enter the code. ये दोनों ऑप्शंस हैं आपके पास ये पोल एक्सेस करने के लिए. आई विल ऑल्सो राइट डाउन द इंस्ट्रक्शंस. आप सिंपली आपको www.menti.com पे जाना और ये कोड एंटर करना. थैंक यू सो मच.
Yes, enter the code. What to do now?
We will just go live in a minute or so, ma'am. As soon as more people join, you will see the question on your screen.
Thank you.
So, question which is here is that आप जहाँ पे भी रहते हैं, wherever your house would be, how would you define the neighborhood around? Is it an apartment or a housing society where you live? Or the area which you can identify most of the faces? Or a ward or a sector which is like a administrative boundary? The next poll is asking you to understand. Shashank, this is after the some of the slides are shared, so you can stop sharing. Going back to the presentation. So most of us are saying that a neighborhood is a place where you can identify most of the faces, what we call, social scientists call as known strangers. नॉन स्ट्रेंजर्स उनका नाम नहीं पता है हमें, बट हमें पता है कि ये कोई है जो हम रोज मिलते हैं while we are walking in the park or something. This is the most important aspect about the safety of our neighborhood where we live. So कल हमने बात किया कि for ITC, for infant and toddler caregiver, how do we understand the neighborhood? So safety is one of the major objectives of an environment which is safe for ITC, and we discussed yesterday that I'm just revisiting this very quickly, so that then afterwards when we are discussing the guidelines we are more clear. So for a small child, they can only walk up to 200 meters. So इसके आसपास जो भी है उनका neighborhood बन जाता है, where they can easily walk with their caregivers, and we need to provide some small kind of play areas, but also their daily essentials in this kind of neighborhood. So let us look at the guidelines that are there. Now, in a plan, like a lot of you said that the society that we live in. So, maybe this could be your building apartment where, you are, so you could consider that as your neighborhood, or to the range of an entire sector where you live can also be actually defined as a neighborhood. But here what we are seeing is that where the ITC finds the facilities and services is the boundary of that neighborhood. So going to the guidelines, what happens, the first requirement or the first guideline for a neighborhood when it is being planned is that it should be mixed use neighborhood, so that the ideal important aspect to consider here is that the space which is being defined as the neighborhood, one can navigate safely. This aspect also we discussed yesterday, but over and above that, it also encourages the mix of uses, because ideally neighborhoods should be planned for ITC in such a way that they enhance the everyday journey. We saw that the child navigates the immediate environment, especially when they are walking around. It is important that their everyday journeys are and experiences outdoors are enhanced. And that can happen if there is some kind of active use on the ground where they are navigating. Now, if we try and look at the qualitative aspects of the neighborhood, there is also the aspect that we want to understand is hierarchy, distance, and the density. Density refers to the density of the people and proportionate amount of density of the facilities as well. But what is important here to sort of touch upon is that how frequently or where should these the facilities occur. So here again, like yesterday, I would point out that I have a symbol which is called compare and contrast. So ये कुछ norms है जो provision of different types of amenities for the infant toddler caregiver are there. But here you can compare it with different other standards as well. So ITC specific recommendations are about providing the facilities in the neighborhood that will allow the child to use these facilities very frequently. So the first sort of scale of open space that is identified in the neighborhood is called a tot lot. Tot lot is a very small park, and the area could be about 50 to 125 square meter for such a tot lot. Now this could be absolutely very near to the house. Now we are using the URDP FI guidelines for urban greening. These are the guidelines that we are referring to, and these are the guidelines that are also in the ITC guideline documents. So we are referring to these. So these are tot lots that are need to you could have. So the neighborhood here that is taken as a reference is about the size of 60 hectares, which means that it would have approximate population of about 15,000 people. 15,000 लोगों का ये neighborhood हम गिन सकते हैं. So here we are looking at the recommendation. So you could have starting from 6 small play lots or tot lots to big amount like 15 odd play lots in these kind of and they should in these kind of neighborhoods, and they should occur very frequently. So almost at every 125 square meters from each other. So they should be many of them and frequently occurring. The second scale is there are 3 to 6 parks where different these are housing parks, so they are slightly large in size, about 5,000 square meters, and this is the place where different age groups besides the ITC unit can also socialize and carry out different types of play. Such parks are recommended to be at every 200 meters. So the guideline for the slightly larger parks is that they should be occurring at every 200 meters. Again, the range where the child, very young child, can walk. Third type is a larger playground, and these could be in the size of 4,000 to 6,000 square meters, also occurring from a very short distance from where the child lives or an ITC unit is going to navigate. And they could be again 3 to 4 such playgrounds where active play of sports or such is possible. So these are the recommended guidelines for how often the different scales of parks and open spaces should be there in the guidelines. Now, if you look at this table, what is recommended for such a size of neighborhood is that the per capita open space in such neighborhood would come to about 3 square meters. This is actually on a very low side. So again, here I have a symbol which is contrast and compare. So I would give you an example of some different cities that have better standards of per capita open space. For example, Vienna is considered to be the most livable city in the world. Now here the per capita open space is 120 square meters per person. I mean per capita. Singapore is also considered to be one of a very good sort of city states. Per capita open space is 66 square meters. Amsterdam is roughly around 45 to 50 square meter per capita. London still 25, roughly 25, 27 square meter per person. So these are the kind of per capita open spaces that they have, but we are recommending really low. So even WHO says 9 to 10 square meter per person should be there. But at least 3 square meters is what is being recommended in the guidelines. Now, if we look at streets, for the streets, the guidelines are that yes. This is basically we saw that the children learn, live and play, but they are always moving from one place to the other. We also looked at the circuit through which they move. So here the first space that the young child would encounter outside their home would be a street, right? Street इसलिए भी बहुत ज्यादा मायने रखता है क्योंकि हमारे cities में 20% जो space है that is occupied, this is the least amount of space that any city would have. Cities like Chandigarh would have more amount of streets, but at least 20%, 18 to 20% of our city space is filled with streets, and this is also very important for the ITC, like I explained. So it is very important. We can consider it as an open space because children are always moving there. It is important. How these kind of streets can be made enjoyable and attractive and comfortable and safe for an ITC unit. So like I said, there is a whole lot of global shift towards understanding it, which is shifting from ease for vehicles to ease for pedestrians. So recently in India, we also had an initiative called Streets for People, which would focus on how people would move more than how vehicles would move on the street. So यहाँ पे हम देख रहे हैं कि priority किसे दी जा रही है. So we are trying to right size the road where the vehicles will move, but we are trying to also have spaces for small children to walk, and they are so safe that the children could themselves cross. So in this, we begin with understanding the streets by saying there are three key things that we need to do. What are the three key things? Limit, which is the first thing. Link all these streets, so, and also share. So I'll come to all of them one by one. First thing that we need to make our streets friendly to an ITC is we need to take these three main steps, right? So here what we are saying is we need to limit the use of streets by vehicles. So limit the number of vehicles that would fly. Link all the destinations within the neighborhoods. So link, and then establish some kind of priority route to link all of these and share the street for different users for it to be used more efficiently. So here you are able to see that we are also talking about limiting the speed of the vehicle. So here most of the safe and shared streets would have 15 या 20-25 किलोमीटर per hour की speed limit रखी जाती है. Normally our cities, as per IRC, internal streets have can go up to 40 kilometer per hour, but what is recommended is even lower than that. So the first thing we want to limit is prevent unnecessary traffic movement. Wherever possible, restrict the traffic movement, prohibit the vehicular traffic completely from some streets. Like you saw one of the streets which was pedestrian, maybe it was only pedestrian for a certain hours, but it is possible to give pedestrians and especially ITC priority for more and more spaces where they can move freely without the fear of traffic. And you see that these are very wide. Second would be to limit the speed of the vehicle. So here again, I have used this symbol which says that this can be contextualized with the regional photographs of the place or area in which you are conducting this training. So you could use local photographs. Again, I'm using this photograph here, which we have already seen before, but here what you can see is there is a speed limit which is already enforced, not only for the pedestrians, but also for the cyclists. Third thing to limit would be the amount of traffic. We said to move the traffic in a more efficient way on less space, some of the streets can be made into one-way traffic. So neighborhood streets, especially which have a lot of ITC activity, need to have obstacle-free movement, obstacle-free pedestrian space. And this arrangement in smaller streets, which we call as neighborhood streets or access streets, they can have a very narrow carriageway for the vehicles. Can be carried out and it can become much calmer. The second is what the term which we use is called chicanes. They are actually intrusions, odd-shaped bulges which come onto the road, and chicanes increase the amount of public space. So sometimes you might have seen that there is a tree, and we do sort of do a curb around it to protect the tree, and that would create an obstruction on the road. But what we are trying to say here is create obstructions for the vehicles so that they slow down, and that makes the street safer for children. Chicanes are also used to have a variety of experience, and it can include in the areas where you can have that small sort of experiences for the very young children. So chicanes are these obstructions that can be created in a right of way to have such kind of pocket activities. The last aspect of limiting is also to say that share some of the street space. Shared street space is increasingly becoming popular everywhere in the world, because we know that vehicle को पूरी तरह निकालना मुमकिन नहीं है. बहुत सारी जगह पे there are pregnant women who are walking, there are small children who can't walk a larger distance, but they need to arrive there. Older people, differently abled, specially abled people. So lot of cities have now taken the approach of having shared streets. So वहाँ बिल्कुल pedestrianization नहीं होता है, बिल्कुल limit of the car या vehicles नहीं होता है. Cars are allowed, vehicles are allowed, but to a very lower limit and also with controlled speeds, right? So this could be done, that the streets can be made into a shared space. We'll talk a little bit more about shared streets also in a bit. And we can also have crossings which are safe, which are called tabletop crossings, or they are also called speed tables. In this, sidewalks or curbs which are slightly raised from the ground are matched at a level. So from one side of the road to the other side of the road, disabled or specially abled people and also children can easily cross without having to navigate the levels which are created in the street. So these are the things that we can do to limit. I think it is again time for a quick poll for us. So I'm going to stop the share and take the poll. Shashank? You are already logged into the Mentimeter, hopefully. So if you just refresh the page, you will be able to see the next question. Okay, so this was already taken before, partially. The question is, how many young children and caregivers have you seen walking to a neighborhood park? कितने बच्चे और उनके साथ उनके जो caregiver है, आपने देखा है कि वो चल के पार्क तक जा सकते हैं? In your neighborhood, wherever in your city where you live. So this is good. I think a lot of people feel that at least 5 to 10% or above can actually go to the park, neighborhood park, by walking.
So I would like to request everyone, please participate in this poll. I can see only 8 responses.
We would like to also discuss something if after the poll. So it would be great if everyone can actively participate in the poll.
Yes, because आपको ये Mentimeter आप फिर इसी तरह के पार्टिसिपेटरी अप्रोच आपको फॉलो करने होंगे जब आप ट्रेनिंग देंगे अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज ऑफिसर्स को. अगर हम खुद ही कंफर्टेबल नहीं है तो फिर हम कैसे इसको आगे ले जाएंगे? So I'm requesting everyone, please participate in this poll. Thank you.
Not getting any new question right now.
Yeah. Next question. Yeah, we can go to the next question. The next question is that how many caregivers have you seen walking on the street or the sidewalk with a stroller or a pram? Have you encountered this? आपने देखा है बहुत बार आपके cities में कि children being carried, because हर समय बच्चे को उठा के चलना possible नहीं होता है. So lot of times we are using strollers. But have you seen this practice in your cities? So we can see that very few of us have seen actually, a kind of people, caregivers, parents, going around with a pram and they're carrying their children in the pram in the cities. I would like to, while the voting closes, I would like please all of you or any one of you to unmute and just discuss. आपको क्यों लगता है कि ये हम नहीं देखते हैं काफी लोगों को प्रैम या स्ट्रॉलर में बच्चों को ले जाते?
Yeah. So if you were to go to Singapore, even children more older than 5 years are being, pushed around in strollers simply because everybody walks there. In our, if you were to look at Mumbai, because of the traffic conditions, I think that except for accessible parks or open spaces, usually people do not use strollers, or they pack up their stroller in their car and then use it only in the open space, but not on the street. So I think it's really to do with traffic.
Okay.
There are no continuous pathways. They're so broken that you continuously walk.
Yes. Shashank, we can close this, please, and I'll go back to. Yes, so we discussed this point yesterday as well when we were discussing the sidewalks and the streets. Stuck. In our streets, we have this issue, a large amount of places are not ITC friendly, right? Something that we discussed multiple times yesterday and we are also discussing today. So today we are looking at some kind of, how to make them, but we are also going back and sort of revisiting the idea कि क्यों नहीं जा पाते, because बहुत दिक्कतें आती है जब हम स्ट्रॉलर लेके अगर चलना चाहेंगे. So it is that many aspiring parents would buy a stroller, but you see that in the city is not possible to carry it around. So like we have seen that these are the places where the children are. They are practically everywhere, and the street is a place which links. अब कल अंजुली मैम ने I think एक question पूछा था कि सारे streets तो हम इसको redesign नहीं कर सकते, redevelop नहीं कर सकते, तोड़ के फिर से नहीं बना सकते. So here what is being said is at least link these places, right? If not all the streets in the city, we can at least link. What are we linking? We are linking the services which are important for an ITC. So घर में जहाँ रह रहे उसके आसपास हमने बोला कि neighborhood में इतनी services होनी चाहिए जो which is within 200, 250, 300 meters. तो वहाँ पे बच्चा हर समय जा रहा है, बार-बार जा रहा है दिन में, और उसके साथ obviously उनका caregiver है. So this is the circuit that we are taking more and more times, and this is what we want to link. We want to link the services, or we want to link the destinations, like we can call it, for the ITC unit wherever they are going, right? So we want to link all the facilities. We want to make it obstacle free. Like किसी ने बताया कि बहुत सारा levels होते हैं, कुछ ना कुछ कचरा पड़ा हुआ है. Somebody has parked the vehicle on the sidewalk. ये बहुत common scenario hai in Indian cities, you will see. So how do we take the stroller out and how do we go around? So this route, at least where the ITCN is identified to be moving to the school, to the park, can be linked, and it can become a safe route, at least that is being designed. How can we do that? What are the guidelines that we can sort of look into? First of all, traffic calming measures. Traffic बहुत speed में नहीं जा रहा है अगर, जैसे आपने अभी बताया कि बहुत ट्रैफिक है और बहुत फास्ट मूविंग ट्रैफिक है मुंबई में, स्पेशली cars has been given so much priority, so they are just zipping by all the can also be one of the measures if the street is not so wide, to have signages and wayfinding. Park kahan hai, school kahan hai. So if you have along this route which you are linking, you should have good wayfinding devices, and then also safety in a lot of ways. So this route which we are asking to link, or it can be linked, becomes very, very important. And along that you could also have trees planted so that that also becomes comfortable and safe for the ITC to navigate. The other thing that I just mentioned are the shared streets. So shared streets are streets which allow very young children to use a full width of the street. How यहाँ पे आप देख रहे हैं कि कार भी है, लेकिन बहुत छोटे बच्चे हैं जो easily, very safely जा सकते हैं. How? Because when it is a shared street, there are so many obstructions that the car cannot zip past. They cannot drive beyond a certain street. So shared street, when it is applied to a residential context, is very, very useful, and it allows the ITC unit to use the street very, very freely. So here what we can look at is that the cars or even cyclists, like you see, slightly elder. So these could be siblings of the small children, young children who could be also monitoring them, but also riding along. So cars, cyclists and pedestrians can share sort of the same surface. Here, because the zoning is not so clearly marked or there's no level difference, everybody, the car driver especially, would always be alert. आपने देखा होगा कि आपका अगर हाउसिंग सोसाइटी है, 4-5 अपार्टमेंट्स है, उसके अंदर जब कार एंटर होती है, maybe they get parked on the ground floor stills or they also go to the basement. So driver is very, very careful because they know कि यहाँ शायद बच्चे खेल रहे होंगे, दौड़ भाग रहे होंगे. So that is the kind of space that some of the internal streets can have. Of course, traffic can be prompted if it is a public street that you are going to encounter a shared street, like you can see the signage here. Again, these symbol that you see, I'm going to keep pointing to it, that you can have such examples, photographs taken in the regional context and also, use those to sort of create. So this is a diagram showing a typical shared street. So आप देख सकते हैं कि parking is staggered on both sides. What does it do? Like you can see in the plan here, it creates obstacles for the car. So अभी तक हम बहुत कार सेंट्रिक डेवलपमेंट अप्रोच में हैं, जहाँ पे हम हमेशा बोल रहे हैं फ्लाईओवर बनाते हैं, कार के लिए बहुत ईज करते हैं. ITC guidelines are the opposite, where we are saying please slow down the car, please slow down the vehicles, but give space for the small children to come out safely with their caregivers, right? So you can see that there is already a signage which says this is a shared street. Please allow this, this signage to become important. And then you also have material sometimes could be different, where the car can go and one cannot go, but it can be a shared sort of a place. One can also have, like you can see here, bollards to safely or safeguard the shared area in the streets. So this is how a shared street varied types of shared streets can be created. The other aspect to consider is also, if you have a wide street, very wide kind of a road, the uses that are there can be segregated. So one can have a segregated space for walking, a segregated space for plantation or green infrastructure, and also seating and other things. So this is very useful if the street is very, very wide. But if it has to be a smaller street, then one can also have the approach of shared street. So the right of way can be defined in such a way that the walking and the people are given the priority. And here particularly, you also see, my pointer is in the right place. You also see that the bollards are there, but the central bollards are little wider to allow a pram or a stroller or even a wheelchair to cross. So these are the small guidelines that one can follow in order to make this ITC friendly. All right. These are also diagrams to show that what can happen. So you can see that because we are saying child is always playing. So there is a possibility of the child to get engaged in some kind of a game while they walk. This would encourage the children to sort of be there. And then there is also a path for safely for people with pram to walk if it is, wide enough. So these are the kind of guidelines that we can use to have a ITC friendly safe street. So Now, if we want to understand the components, right? Again, going back to the steps, we said step 1, we want to determine the scale. Step 2, we want to determine the objective. In step 3, we want to understand what are the components. So let us take the example of a safe street here and understand some of the components, not all of them, but some of the components, just to see how these components can be used. So the first component, which is easy to understand, is that we can have traffic protective elements that can be safeguarding the ITC unit from the traffic. So here we can sort of see that bollards are placed, and like I mentioned, some of them are placed wide apart to be able to facilitate the kind of people that you would have. Other ideas here could be to have a low fence where there is a private property so that there is visual connectivity and it feels safe. Parked cars, like you can see on the other side of the streets, they can be in a demarcated space only so that they don't try to overlap onto the sidewalk and take the place which is marked for walking, and put lot of obstacles between the pavement area and the road so that the vehicles cannot be accidentally coming inside of the space which is meant for only walking. So these could be some of the components if you want to put protective elements like bollards, how you could use these components. Another component for safe street could be lighting. So how do you choose lighting that is, most of the streets we see that the lighting is meant for only traffic, so they are very tall. Sometimes they also very much brighter and create a glare and discomfort for people to walk. So while planning the lighting component, what needs to be understood is that there should be no shadow zones or dark spots like they are called, so that there is even lighting, it is well lit, and there are also recommended lux levels if you want to put 6 to 8 lux level at a pedestrian height, so that it does not get into the eyes or disturb somebody who is carrying out the activities here. So these are the aspects that needs to be kept in mind. I already gave an example of the sort of bench that you select. Now, what is important here to understand is that there are components which are listed, but then there are also experts who could come in, and help the city officials. So, आप जब training deliver कर रहे हैं तो इसको बता सकते हैं that this is to familiarize them and make them aware. However, there is always a possibility to engage with professionals who can be experts in this area to be able to have a good environment for ITC. There could be social scientists who can be engaged. There are specialists who are experts in collecting, collating data, stakeholder engagement, and of course design. So this is obviously always available for the cities, but we are still saying, at least if they are aware, and able to carry out the smallest possible sensitization to all these elements. So again, to summarize, you will see the symbol here, which is summarizing. There are also other objectives like green streets or playful streets that can be there, and they can be sort of matched with appropriate components at the most. Now, just taking a next step towards understanding how will we also measure this. So again, we will take a deeper dive into this in the other module, but so you see these are all the symbols which are coming from the objectives that we had discussed yesterday. Inclusive, safe. So if we just looked at safe, right? So here, what are it should be, it can have percentage of one-way streets, all these ideas that we are discussed. So these are the indicators which is listed in the ENM matrix here, and they need to be understood together with the design guidelines. So these are the indicators. How do you measure if it is safe or not? So you can see that what is the street light spacing? What is there a presence of a cycle route or not? What is the amount of total streets where four-wheeler or two-wheeler traffic is there, and the amount of street which is having walkway? So these are the indicators that can help us measure if the objective is met or not. Here the objective is to save street and the components that we just discussed. So we can measure it against the indicators. Now let's quickly come to the guidelines. Similarly for open spaces, small young children, they need a safe outdoor space to play, right? But they also need fresh air, and they need simulation with the green plants, trees. They need connection with the nature and the natural environment. So playing is a primary activity for small children, right? What do? They throughout the day they are playing, but it is also a means for them to have fun or socialize, most importantly to learn. कल हमने बात किया था for the benefit of those who were absent. While I'm speaking, I'm just going to ask Shashank to share the screen. This is the last quiz that we will take for the day, very quickly. And कल हमने बात किया था कि first 1,000 days of the child's life, which is the 3 years, is a time when all the neuron connections are getting formed. 90% of the brain is getting developed in 0 to 3 years. So we are focusing on the younger children in all these discussions, and we are saying this is a quiz, so it should have, yes. The question here I will just share is, we just looked at ITC guidelines for neighborhoods. We discussed an ideal layout for the neighborhoods. How many types of open spaces did we discuss? Were there 3 types or were there 5 types of open spaces? Same Mentimeter link पे आप जा सकते हो और इसको refresh करेंगे तो you will be able to see this question.
Requesting everyone to please participate in the poll.
The next question on the quiz is, how many parks and playgrounds should be present in an ideal neighborhood of 60 hectares? Parks and playgrounds. आपने सबने बताया कि 3 तरह के ओपन स्पेसेस होने चाहिए in a neighborhood. So one of the types, obviously you remember, that was parks and playgrounds. How many of them should we discussed the norms, guidelines for a neighborhood of 60 hectares. So how many parks and playgrounds should be present? Please refresh your screen again so you will be able to see the next question there. So yes, there should be at least 2 to 3 playgrounds in such a size of a neighborhood. Please refresh your screen again. You'll be able to see the next question, which is how far apart should the tot lots be placed? Tot lots are the smallest size of open spaces that we saw, right? How far apart? कितना दूर एक दूसरे से ये हो सकता है? At 125 meter from home, or at 500 meters from school, or they should be at every 300 meters. Right. The answer is actually at 300 meters. The size we said was about 50 to 125 square meters. So we're just revisiting this to take a recap, because now we are going to go on to understanding the open spaces again. Guidelines for open spaces. Okay. So here, wherever there are quizzes that the slide deck has the quiz or the poll, and the symbol that you would see is stop and discuss. So आप जब ट्रेनिंग कर रहे हैं तब भी आप ये सिंबल देखेंगे तो आपको you get a cue that you can discuss this more. Okay. So here again, going to the symbol that these images can be localized as per the context where you are delivering the training. But according to our present guidelines for ITC, the open spaces in a neighborhood have, like you all rightly pointed out, they are in 3 categories. This has been done on the basis of what? Some minimum area required for each space, for different kind of activities, and the minimum distance that one can walk from the home. This can also be differing as per the density of the population, but right now we are not going into that discussion, but we are saying that at least these 3 categories can be present. So the smallest one, like you can see in the picture, it's called a tot lot. तो ये छोटी सी जगह हो सकती है, बिल्कुल छोटी 50 square meters. Sometimes having a smaller space and more people in that space also encourages small children to interact, navigate, negotiate, बच्चे के साथ तू मुझे बैठने दे झूले पे, तू थोड़ी देर wait कर ले. तो these negotiations the child learns when there is that give and take between the others. They could be slightly older children also. Unfortunately, in the recent times, the COVID is totally restricted that from happening, but the recommendation still remains. There is a small tot very frequently in the neighborhood, extremely useful. बड़े पार्क्स हो सकते हैं जहाँ पे बहुत सारी दूसरी एक्टिविटी हो सकती है. They can be multifunctional, used at different times of the day, and these have average size of about 5,000 to 10,000 square meters. So these can be slightly bigger, and they could provide more opportunities for more structured play. Like they could have small playgrounds like tennis courts or such, where elder children are also playing. So smaller children can also sort of run around in these open spaces, just freely navigate in these spaces. Now, in many neighborhoods, these kind of places are neither present or they cannot even be provided for. Like a lot of old fabric in our cities, old cities have this kind of a density that we cannot create large spaces of this sort. So in such cases, there could be leftover spaces. यहाँ पे आप देख रहे हैं कि फ्लाईओवर की नीचे की जगह है जो यूज हो सकती है. So leftover spaces in the city, and there are many leftover spaces in the city. These can be used to cover the gap between non-provision, non-existent open space, and provision of appropriate scales of activities for young people. Right? Sometimes it could also be temporal use. So अगर ऐसा होता है कि कहीं पे पार्किंग एरिया है बहुत ज्यादा रेजिडेंशियल एरिया में, तो वो पार्किंग रात को पूरा फुल रहता है कार से, लेकिन all these cars go away. So in the early late afternoon or early evening, opportunities can be created. It's not only it's not that there is no provision, there is no scope of having big spaces, then we cannot provide. There are also guidelines that say that these kind of spaces can also be used for the children. So again, now if we go to the component, selection of the component, and let's again continue to look at the safe open spaces, because that is where we are constantly focused upon, just to have a continuity of understanding. So again, in these, to make an open space safe for ITC, there could be many elements which we need, which are needed to come together, so that that place is welcoming, it is safe, and it is inclusive for the young child and the caregiver. So again, we will look at some of these. The legibility and signage, clear visibility of the sightlines is very important factor in enhancing the perception of safety, right? This also we discussed yesterday. So one is simple thing is that there could be signages to guide to interesting destination. So बच्चों का बहुत बड़ा पार्क है अगर, तो बच्चों का खेलने का एरिया कहाँ है, या कहाँ पे जाके आपको पानी मिल सकते हैं या वॉशरूम्स मिल सकते हैं. So these clear signages would help somebody to use the space more effectively and with lot of comfort. यहाँ पे हम क्या guidelines apply कर सकते हैं, that these should be with the help of signages, they can be easy to locate. Even entrance exits should be easy to be located. Then we can have pathways to connect the destination. So अगर बड़ा पार्क है, इसके अंदर जो छोटे छोटे parts में कोई destinations हैं, food courts, again washrooms or play areas, then one can easily walk towards there. And if they are paved, then the strollers can be pushed to these spaces. Otherwise, that again is very challenging. One can make sure that there are no solid walls, but there are planting edges. This increases the green cover, but it would not obstruct the sight lines, again making it very safe for the ITC units to use. We can also find it wherever there are sight lines, one can have more interesting objects or features that the child would find engaging, so that the child would love to run to these places, and more use of space can be done by the children. So the user group here you see are not particularly just small children, but it is basically to say that this kind of an environment would make it very safe. The other thing is that if, we are in a country which is most of the parts of the countries are very hot for most of the years, most of the months in a year. So shading and cooling devices become very, very important for the caregivers to rest, to sort of even allow the children to take a small snack, or have a little time for the nap for the children, or whatever is required. So natural shading, you can always have canopies if required, and there is large space. बहुत जगह पे ऐसा होता है कि बेसमेंट के ऊपर बनी हुई है जगह पे, जहाँ पे बड़े पेड़ लगाना मुमकिन नहीं होता है, then places where you could use canopies. And play equipments like you see sandboxes and such should also be placed under shade. Otherwise they tend to get very, very hot if those kind of materials are used, and they can harm the children very directly. So these are also shading structure, shading devices wherever the child can play. The other thing is that instead of, we have these lot of play spaces which they are very, very colorful, what 3 or 4 activities, slides, but more than that, if we can have, they are very inexpensive. That is the first benefit. But also children would appropriately use them, and this allows them to explore, right, on their own, use their imagination to sort of navigate in these. So you see that on one side there are just logs of wood which the child is using to climb. Some of the children would jump over it, some of them would use it as a balancing beam. So they would use the imagination, and this is when the development and the learning is happening. They would explore different textures, they would dig, create castles or structures out of it. This is where advanced learning can happen. So these materials, even water can be used, and children love to play with water. So sand, natural tree branches or trunks, stones and pebbles, and these are the places where you would also find small insects. We most of the time find it very dangerous that these insects are there, but children would love to run after these insects or collect them also, in their small bottles and all of that. So these are the places where exploration can happen around the natural materials, and a lot of learning happens, right? Some of the greatest designers of play equipments and play spaces near all over the world, Tim Gillett is one of them, and I believe NIUA team had a chance to, interact. They would always vouch for, in their design spaces also, there are only natural elements that are used. So even when you are wanting to give climbing, adventurous play, which is not for very young children, but there also the play equipments also can be used, can be made using very natural elements. So we can combine playing objects with soft artificial rubber. These are the things that are used, but we can instead use sand and wood wherever possible. So of course, checking the safety regulations, but these can be introduced. So it enhances sensory play, adventurous play, especially for the different abled people, differently abled children. This would be very, very useful. So play equipments can have lots and lots of natural elements also. So again, going back to how would we use these guidelines for parks and open spaces. So you would have indicators that needs to be seen, and these two documents are always used hand in hand. I would like to also go to the next section to show you how, snippets of how these pages are interrelated and all of that. But these are just to summarize the indicators versus how these are being used. So how do we sort of look into these guidelines? Today, the contents that were covered are essentially from infant toddler caregiver friendly neighborhood design guidelines. So this document is providing the guidance of how to implement the key ITCN features, but they are always used in reference to these two documents. So the best practices would give you insights into more successful examples in lots of parts of the world. And the evaluation matrix is a way to sort of cross-check. So a typical page on an evaluation matrix would look like this. Like I said, there are 65 indicators, and this symbol refers to the inclusive So here the indicator is saying that you need to provide quality of public seating to stop and rest in the neighborhood. This is the indicator. Now, if you want to measure it, there are 3 levels. So this, when you will see this, you will also see something like refer to ITCN guidelines, page number 54 and 55. So the benchmarks, again, I'm saying we will revisit this in the next modules, but benchmark value could be thriving, striving, and surviving, which is just about their better than what could be, the minimal requirement, or, even thriving, which means that really well equipped, that component is. And when we cross refer in the guidelines page, you would see how to do it. So what are the guidelines that one can follow? So we can have continuous borders around trees and natural elements. These two examples are shown, and they are also listed what can be done. So we can have planters around which people can sit, so it's always not possible to give benches. So we can have the edges can be made 450 to 600 mm where babies, so like I was talking about the bench slightly wider so that the small babies can be put to rest on them. It can have a slight incline so that the rainwater does not get collected, it can run off. So these are the details in which the guidelines are there. Hopefully in the next courses we will get into such details also. But currently we have just touched upon the guidelines briefly to understand how to create a infant toddler caregiver neighborhood. So you would see this in the guideline document. So there is always a cross reference for the ease of use. Again, to summarize, we are using these guidelines first of all by setting the objectives. These objectives we have seen in yesterday's session, and today we have understood how for each of these objectives, what are the guidelines and what are the components that are there. When you do a delivery, because this is these are small sections in the guideline document which are very quick. One can make flashcards. Even the city officials could use them as flashcards, and they could be pinned up, and one could create a mosaic of flashcards of what is the requirement and what guidelines can be used. So they are come very handy if they are made into flashcards. They could also be made into booklets, where the booklets has a template of a certain type of a tree or a bench or a lighting, and it can be overlapped with the photographs to see what could be the resultant outcome. PowerPoint presentations, of course, we are looking at that already. And one could also have case studies of successful projects already implemented, so that there is a learning of what are the kind of components that can be used to make your ITC friendly neighborhood. So we end like yesterday with the references of the core documents which are there. Wherever in the slide deck, we will see you will see the guide notes. At the foot of the guide notes also some references have been provided for extra understanding on the topic. So thank you, and I request once more everybody to please go back and share the Google document. Hepzibah, there are two documents before training, which has a title called BT, and AT, which is after training. So
Yes.
can we share the other document with the participants?
Sure.
Or
I'll
we can put
share it
a link
now.
in the chat also.
Okay, sure. I'll share it now as well as on email.
So I invite everybody to fill the it is the same questionnaire, but it is another form. So it will help us understand if the training was delivered in an effective, efficient manner or not. And while you all do that, please feel free to ask any questions about anything that was discussed today. The next sessions are planned on Monday and Tuesday next, right? Any questions?
Thank
It
you.
was a slightly long presentation, so I have gone a little quickly. But if there are any questions, or if there are some parts that you want me to revisit, we can quickly do that. Yes, Krishna Kanji.
Thank you, Purvi, for the excellent presentation. Request training agencies to please ask if you have any query, any comment, any observation, any feedback. You're most welcome.
Yeah, so I'd just like to share with you what my 7-year-old grandson told me. Okay, when I asked him, "What do you see as a good park?" So he told me, all the rest of it. But there are two things that stood out. One he said is that the flower beds or the plants that are, the shrubberies that are planted, especially the flower beds, he says, they should not be, if a child was to fall into it, because they're going to try and crouch down, smell, look at the insects and things, they should not be scratched. Those were his words. So they should be the plants should be child friendly, according to him. And the other thing is, now he's a 7-year-old, but what he says was that there has to be a medical room. According to him, it was
first aid
yes,
or something.
yes, he says, because children do fall down, and not always the DDs and the caregivers who take them. They call DDs in Mumbai. So they said if they who take them may not be having your plasters and things. So there has to be, because children do fall down. They do hurt themselves. So there either has to be a doctor or a nurse present there. These are the two observations of a 7-year-old.
Children are amazing. They are excellent observers of their environment, and they are constantly learning and putting conclusions in their mind, forming a whole lot of what we call as visual library for themselves to refer back to. So one of the things that we always advocate is that when we are planning these parks and open spaces, involve children as important stakeholders, take feedback from them, ask them what they would like to have, and this would really be very helpful, because I have for the first time heard this, that a first aid box is required from a 7-year-old child. Yes. So very important observations. We can learn a lot from the children for sure.
मनोज जी
Very for
आप
sharing your experience.
मनोज जी फ्रॉम सीजीजी नैनीताल, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे?
जी मैं I just want to make a point out here that I stay in the hills. You know, Nainital is a very different place, and what you are talking about is it was more of a, you know, it had a plains bias in it. Now, what I would say that when we were young and we were, I mean, when we used to climb to our school, it was fun. Basically, there were no cars honking in the background, and we never feared cars at that point of time. The lanes or the roads were primarily made for mules and horses and human beings. Now, with in those narrow roads, when cars move, small children with pittus in their back. Our time we used to call them pittus, backpacks. So we used to walk up, no problem was there. But today, what I see is that walking up for children is almost impossible. So what is happening is that parents are sending them in small cabs. So what is happening is when they find that it is risky to walk up, so they are sending them in cabs. So that is creating even a bigger trouble. And when the school closes and the parents start coming to pick up their wards, then it becomes a huge issue because there are in those small lanes, those people who want to walk out there, it's extremely difficult. And second, the public spaces are being imposed upon by the government. You know, our time, government house, we used to walk in there free, play cricket. We were very small and it was very easy to walk in there. But today it's almost like similarly, if you come with the High Court coming up, you can't go there. The children do not have many places around to walk around. So individually, talking about prams, for example, our time when we were young, we could see more prams, you know, on the mall road. Rather, I mean, today with so much of congestion and so much of pedestrians even walking, it's absolutely impossible to even, you know, एक स्टॉलर को ले जाना. So we are living in a place now which is not child friendly. I mean, it is absolutely car friendly spaces. I mean, everything is being made car friendly. It's not pet friendly. It is not bicycle friendly. So we are talking about a development which needs to be looked into. I mean, there are not many parks and spaces. Our time we would walk, play there. I mean, these it's almost possible to play where children can even play. And the roads are dirty. So, I mean, yesterday I was seeing a photograph with a young one sitting on a park, green, and he was touching the ground. Our time will tell our grandchildren कि भैया छूना मत, इसमें इन्फेक्टेड है, और हाथ भी अगर छू लिया तो डिसइंफेक्टेंट हाथ में लगा के उसके साफ करेंगे और कहेंगे ये बहुत गंदी जगह. तो आई डोंट नो, आई मीन आई एम नॉट वेरी वेरी श्योर कि हो क्या रहा है और आइडियल क्या सिचुएशन है और हमें भी क्या हो रहा है. ये मैम, दिस इज इट.
We are extra safe. Children are not allowed to take some kind of risks and adventures. That is actually, कल हमने बात किया था कि जो केयर गिवर है उसका बॉडी लैंग्वेज या उसके जो रिफ्लेक्सेस होते हैं, that actually informs the child. And so if the caregiver is really resistant in walking, or they're always doing, trying to be very overprotective, no risk taking is possible for the children, and that is a huge deterrent in their development, and some of the skills that are required to navigate in the world in the adulthood, they would not actually acquire at all.
और बच्चों को तो आजकल मुझे लगने लग गया है कि जो मास्क पहनते हैं ना हम सब लोग, वो भी छोटे बच्चों को ऐसा लगता है कि दिस इज अ नॉर्म, दिस इज हाउ वी हैव टू लिव. तो मुझे बड़ा सरप्राइजिंग लगता है कि अगर तुम उसके बगल में बैठे हो और मैंने मास्क थोड़ा नीचे रखा है, तो अगर मैंने किसी छोटे बच्चे को गोदी में पकड़ा है तो ही पुल्स अप माय मास्क नाक के ऊपर लगा देता है. तो दिस इज अ वेरी स्ट्रेंज काइंड ऑफ साइकोलॉजी चिल्ड्रन विल डेवलप. तो ये
Thank you, Manoj, for sharing your view. Thanks a lot. Um, Dr. A.K. Singh from RCS Lucknow. Sir, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे? Any feedback, any comments, any query, inputs?
And while we also take that up, please request everybody. It is the same. You will see that it is the same questionnaire that we are shared again on the Google form. Hepzibah?
Yes, ma'am. We have also emailed everyone. So you have received it. In case there is some issue right now, you can also quickly log into your email addresses and fill it up. As well as I've shared it in the chat box, so you can also access the form right away. Please do fill it up because it is important for us to also collate what your understanding has been from the session today. तो आप सबसे निवेदन है कि आप ये फॉर्म भर दें और ताकि हम अपने रिपोर्ट में इसको इनकी जो लर्निंग्स हैं वो डाल सकें, क्योंकि हमारी हेल्प करेगा आगे जाके ट्रेनिंग सेशंस को उस हिसाब से मोल्ड करने में। तो आप सबसे रिक्वेस्ट है, प्लीज जरूर से इस फॉर्म को भर दीजिए।
थैंक यू हेप्जिबा। किला से कोई है अभी? आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे? Anyone from Kila?
Yes, I'm Reshma from Kila.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding this ITCN perspective, I have a kid. She is 1.5 old, and as Soros mentioned right now, the mask that is actually considered as a norm right now. She used to pull that up and pick and give it to me all the time. And when I just take her to outside, to any other places, I'm really concerned about the COVID, but still, I used to make her wear the mask, and she used to keep that with her. And to any other parks that's near to my home when I go, I cannot actually put my girl right down. So these days, what I used to do is we take her for a walk in the road that's nearby my home at night. So I really wanted this ITCN project to go forward and implement really good projects. Yeah.
Thanks, Reshma. Ask Hyderabad se we have.
Yeah, hi. This is Ashok here from Hyderabad. In fact, I was so happy being an architect and urban designer. So happy to see this presentation and talking about intricate details of the kind of street planning and the toddler friendly. Helpful, really helpful for us to, of course, we know and we practice in our day in, day out architecture practices, layout design. But these needs to go further to urban managers. I think this program would definitely, I think, help us to reach them so that they understand why we speak about it and what is the need of our. I still remember 5-8 years back, we were talking about disabled friendly streets, disabled friendly neighborhood, disabled friendly spaces. I think that's all a lot of planning problem, but this ITC, again, it is one more advanced stage of looking after the neighborhoods or streets or the layouts, what we are talking about. I think it's a wonderful advancement in how the various institutes are looking for, and as an architect, we also happy to incorporate these kind of aspects into our projects, as well as to inform urban managers to follow it. And it is very much important since the age of smart cities. I think it's a very wonderful module. Again, I must congratulate NIUA and the Purviji and SEPT. So I think it's a really helpful in moving forward and looking after for future modules as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you, Hepjiba.